Hey there fellow gardeners and welcome back to Smart Garden. If you're watching this video, chances are you've embraced the wonderful world of vermicomposting and your wriggling workforce has been transforming kitchen scraps into black gold all season long. But as the temperatures start to drop and winter's chill sets in, there's a very real threat lurking that could devastate your entire composting operation overnight: frostbite. Today we're diving deep into the essential strategies you need to protect your worm bin from freezing temperatures and ensure your composting crew not only survives, but continues thriving through the coldest months ahead. Trust me, your worms and your spring garden will thank you for taking action now. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the freezing conditions in your backyard. Composting worms, particularly the beloved red wigglers that most of us use, are remarkably efficient decomposers, but they have a fatal weakness. They're cold-blooded creatures with absolutely no defense against sustained freezing temperatures. When the mercury drops below freezing and stays there, your worms can't regulate their body temperature, and their metabolic processes begin to shut down. What makes this particularly devastating is how quickly it happens. A single night of hard frost can transform a thriving worm bin into a frozen graveyard, with hundreds or even thousands of worms dying before you even realize there's a problem. The threat isn't just uncomfortable cold weather that slows them down. We're talking about actual tissue damage from ice crystal formation within their bodies, which is exactly what frostbite does to these delicate creatures. Understanding the specific dangers means recognizing that worms need temperatures above freezing to survive, with their ideal range being between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Below 32 degrees, ice begins forming in their bedding, and once that ice penetrates their environment, the worms have nowhere to retreat. Unlike earthworms that can burrow deep into the ground below the frost line, composting worms live in the top layers of organic material, making them especially vulnerable. The urgency of preparing right now, especially as we're heading into November 2025, cannot be overstated. Once the ground freezes and that first hard frost hits, it's often too late to implement protective measures effectively. Your window of opportunity is closing, and the time to act is before you see that first frost warning in your weather forecast. The great indoor escape: relocating your worms. For many vermicomposters, the simplest and most foolproof solution is bringing your worm bin indoors for the winter months. This isn't about being overprotective, it's about being pragmatic. An indoor environment offers consistent temperatures that keep your worms active and composting year-round, turning what would be a dormant winter period into continued productivity. The key is finding the right location within your home that balances accessibility with the worm's needs. A garage that doesn't freeze, an unfinished basement, a utility room, or even the space under your kitchen sink can work beautifully as winter quarters for your composting crew. The ideal spot maintains temperatures between 50 and 70 degrees, has some protection from extreme temperature swings, and won't be disturbed by constant traffic or activity. The transition process itself requires some thoughtfulness rather than just grabbing your bin and hauling it inside. Worms are surprisingly sensitive to sudden environmental changes, so acclimation is important. If possible, move your bin gradually closer to its winter home over several days, allowing the worms to adjust to the changing conditions. Once inside, you'll need to monitor moisture levels more carefully than you did outdoors. Indoor environments, especially heated ones, tend to be drier, which means your bedding may dry out faster than usual. Check the moisture level weekly by squeezing a handful of bedding. It should feel like a wrung-out sponge with just a few drops of water released. Your feeding routine might also need adjustment since indoor bins can process food differently than outdoor ones. Start conservatively with smaller feedings and watch how quickly the worms are processing materials before ramping up to your normal schedule. If bringing your bin inside isn't feasible, or if you're committed to outdoor composting year-round, proper insulation becomes your primary defense against killing frosts. Think of insulation as creating a protective cocoon around your worm bin that traps the heat generated by microbial decomposition while blocking the penetrating cold from outside. The beauty of this approach is that decomposition itself generates warmth, and your job is simply to help retain that precious heat. Natural materials like straw, dried leaves, and hay make excellent insulators because they create air pockets that resist heat transfer. You'll want to build up substantial layers, not just a thin covering. We're talking about 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top of the bin, and if you're serious about winter protection, even more around the sides. Creating a thermal barrier goes beyond just piling materials on top. Consider wrapping your entire bin in old blankets, burlap sacks, or even bubble wrap for extra insulation, securing everything with bungee cords or rope to keep it in place during winter winds. Some innovative composters create insulated skirts around their bins using straw bales, which not only provide excellent insulation, but also add thermal mass that helps moderate temperature swings. Strategic placement of your bin matters enormously too. Position it against a south-facing wall where it can capture whatever winter sun is available, or tuck it into a protected corner where buildings or fences provide windbreaks. Even placing your bin near a heat source like an exterior dryer vent or a heat pump can provide those few extra degrees that make the difference between frozen and functional. Feeding for frostbite prevention. Here's something that surprises many worm composters. What you feed your worms and when you feed them can actually help protect them from cold stress. The decomposition process is exothermic, meaning it generates heat as microorganisms break down organic matter. By strategically feeding your worms before winter sets in, you're essentially giving them a built-in heating system. The hot meal strategy involves adding warm, moist food scraps that will decompose actively, creating metabolic heat within the bin. Think of it as preparing a slow-burning fuel source that keeps the bin's internal temperature above freezing, even when the outside air is bitter cold. Before that first frost hits, create a substantial feeding layer, approximately 2 inches deep, combining carbon-rich materials like shredded leaves, straw, or wood chips with nitrogen-rich materials such as aged manure, grass clippings, or your usual kitchen scraps. The key is using materials that are already partially decomposed rather than fresh, whole items. Fresh food scraps can actually cause problems in winter because they may freeze before decomposing, creating cold pockets within your bin rather than heat. Semi-decomposed materials break down steadily and reliably, generating consistent warmth throughout the cold months. Cover this feeding layer with 3 to 4 inches of additional mulch, which acts as an insulating blanket that traps the heat generated below while retaining moisture. A light watering of this new layer activates microbial activity immediately, jump-starting the decomposition process before freezing temperatures arrive. Beyond winter, post-frostbite recovery and spring success. Even with the best protection, some worms may experience cold stress during particularly harsh winter conditions, so knowing how to assess and support recovery is valuable knowledge. When spring temperatures stabilize and you're ready to transition your worms back to full activity, take time for a careful damage assessment. Healthy, active worms will be moving through the bedding, responding to light, and showing their characteristic pink or red coloration. Worms that experienced cold stress might appear sluggish, darker, or remain in tight balls rather than stretching out naturally. Don't panic if your population seems reduced. Worms are incredibly resilient and will reproduce rapidly once conditions improve. Continue maintaining optimal moisture and temperature while offering easily digestible foods like coffee grounds and aged manure to support their recovery. The spring thaw period requires thoughtful management to prevent shocking your worms with rapid temperature changes. If you brought your bin indoors, don't rush it back outside on the first warm day. Instead, wait until nighttime temperatures consistently stay above 45 degrees, and even then, transition gradually by placing the bin outside during warm days and bringing it back in at night for a week or so. For bins that stayed outdoors all winter, remove heavy insulation gradually rather than all at once, allowing the worm population to adjust to changing conditions. This is also an excellent time to add fresh bedding and a nutritious feeding layer to support the population explosion that typically follows successful overwintering. Building long-term resilience means learning from each winter's challenges and successes. Keep notes about what protection methods worked best, when you needed to add extra insulation, and how your worm population responded to different strategies. This knowledge becomes invaluable for future winters and helps you develop a robust year-round composting system that handles whatever weather comes your way. If you found this guide helpful and want to keep your garden thriving through every season, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss our practical gardening tips and solutions. Share this video with fellow gardeners who might be worried about their worm bins this winter, and drop a comment below telling us what winter protection strategies have worked best for you. Together, we're building a community of knowledgeable gardeners who help each other succeed. Until next time, keep growing, keep composting, and keep those worms happy and healthy.